Welcome back to another Silicon Dojo question and answer video. So basically these are videos I do more or less every day where I pick a question down from the comment section and I answer it for you folks. Not necessarily every day. Yesterday I decided to play video games in the afternoon. I was gonna come into the office. I planned to come into the office yesterday afternoon. And then I just played video games. That's how it is. That's how it is when you're self-employed. As long as all of your numbers equal whatever the hell your numbers have to equal. Some days you can just play video games instead of going to work. Though I will say, to be honest with you, in the morning, I did work figuring out how to do a speech recognition with Azure Cognitive Services. So I did spend the morning actually figuring some stuff out with code. So I don't feel like yesterday was a complete waste. But then it got to be yesterday afternoon. I had lunch, had a cup of coffee. I was just like, you know what? I'm going to play God of War again. I haven't played God of War in a couple of years. I'm going to go play God of War. And that's what I did instead of doing one of these videos. Anyways, apropos of probably nothing, I just figured I'd explain that. So, again, most days, I try to do these Silicon Dojo videos. Anyways, so this question, hey Eli, I have to admit I appreciating you telling it like it is, but my gosh, sometimes it's depressing listening to the reality. Are there tech CEOs with beer taps who are good people, question mark? My question is, you talk about not needing to move to Silicon Valley or Austin, but don't you think there's a value in being where the tech energy is? There is a scene that creates creativity. If you're in the oil industry, wouldn't you want to be in Texas, in the financial industry in New York? So there's a couple of interesting questions here. The first question I will answer is, are there good CEOs with beer taps? And unfortunately, I'd have to say, there are probably CEOs that are trying to be good CEOs, but they've been led down the wrong path. One of the reasons I scream about beer taps, and I scream about on-site childcare, and I scream about these things that people think are good, is because there are a lot of folks out there that are actually trying to be good as managers, or trying to be good as executives, and they go out in the world and they talk with other executives and other managers, and they basically get told a line of crap, and then, well, if all they hear is a line of crap, they start believing that line of crap, and all of a sudden the employees start getting punished. Again, it's peer grouping, right? You start to have groupthink that parallels the other people that you talk with, that you deal with. Again, this is one of those things, one of the things that I think is valuable for me when I come here and I talk to you doing these question and answer sessions, or I do classes or whatever else, is my peer group is entrepreneurs, right? So many of the people that we hear from on YouTube or anywhere else, they're employees, and they're always screaming about their horrible, evil boss that's trying to take over the world. And one of the things that I try to explain, having been a boss, is many times you're just trying to keep your business afloat so you can go home and deal with your wife who has cancer. You know, bosses have problems too. Bosses are humans too. And so again, for me, I sit there and I talk with other business owners, I talk with CEOs, I talk with executives, and so, you know, I get the viewpoint from how they are looking at the world, and then I try to present that to you folks. One of the big issues that we have right now with a lot of the CEOs in the tech industry is that, how do I say this without sounding horrible? Family friendly, but still horrible. They're kids that are legally allowed to have sex and drink alcohol. I know. If you say that about 20-year-olds, 20-year-olds get really mad. Hey, when I was 20 and people said that to me, I got really mad. And then you get older and you realize it's true. It's so true. Anyways, the problem that you run into with a lot of these CEOs and founders is, frankly, they are young as F. Most of them have very little experience in the real world. They have very little experience understanding liability issues or anything like that. They go out, they have some pretty cool idea for a dog dating app or whatever. They get millions and millions and millions of dollars dumped on them. They are trying to figure out how to make their business functional and successful, and then they listen to stupid people. It happens to us all. We all listen to stupid people sometimes. And so they go out and they talk with their peer group. They talk with other 20-something-year-olds about how they should manage their company. And hey, if Mark's company has a beer tap and Susie's company has whatever else, blah, 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 all of a sudden you start to think that that's the way to do it. Again, if you look at Uber, Uber became uber successful. One of the reasons Uber became uber successful is because Travis got a metric crap ton of investment and was a complete and utter asshole. I am still, one of the things that irritates me to this day is that the federal government didn't go after Travis for RICO violations. Basically, when you look at what Travis did, he was a national criminal. Like literally, the company decided to break the law in many, I'm not going to say all, but many of the jurisdictions that they were spinning up Uber in. They literally tried to go around regulations and regulators. And so one of the big issues that you run into is you see Uber technically being so successful, and then you have some other young CEO trying to figure out how to make their company successful. Everybody's like, ooh, look how awesome Travis is, or ooh, look at how awesome one of these other jackasses is. And then they decide, well, they must be doing it right, and all of a sudden you take this beautiful little CEO and you put them through the grinder and they come out an asshole within a year or so. So yes, can quote unquote, good CEOs have beer taps for a little while. But the counter is counting down. The timer is going tick, 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 tick. If they get the beer tap out of their startup now, they may be able to recover their souls. But if it stays there too long, it's all going to go to hell. So anyways, this is one of the reasons I talk about the things that I do. It's because not very many people are willing to call these people out for being yahoos. Anyways, probably why I have the subscriber count that I do. On to the next question. The main question, though, is you talk about not needing to move to Silicon Valley or Austin, but don't you think there is a value in being where the tech energy is? There is a scene that creates creativity. If you're in the oil industry, wouldn't you want to be in Texas, in the financial industry in New York? Not really at this point as far as Silicon Valley goes. One of the things that you have to realize, and again, one of my arguments for the entire technology industry, is the technology industry, or let's call it the IT industry, everything's technology. The IT industry is getting a bit long in the tooth at this point in time. Again, I've been alive since the 1970s. IT, as we know it in the modern world, has gone along with my life. There was a time when all this stuff was bright and new and flashy and amazing and sexy, and now we're kind of in the modern world where it's all starting to become pen and paper. It's all starting to become a little just, rote. It's just crap that's basically been done before. How can you make a product more expensive, not necessarily make a product more valuable? And one of the things to be thinking about with this is that over the years, that the colleges and universities and boot camps and everything else have been churning out more and more technology professionals, to the point where having an MCSE anymore isn't that big a deal. For having the CCNP isn't necessarily that big a deal. Finding coders isn't necessarily that big a deal because there are so many of these folks that are already available. Again, back quote unquote back in the old days, right? If you had all the coders and they were graduating college and they were going directly to Silicon Valley, that was the suck. That was the suck of all these people going to the tech centers. But the colleges are still pushing out, comp sci majors are still pushing out IT majors. The boot camps are still churning people out, and we're getting more and more technology professionals. And the reality is that you simply do not have to be in Silicon Valley the way that you used to. One of the things to be thinking about with a lot of these startup companies is it wasn't that long ago, again, within my professional life, that in order to create a startup company, there was a lot of technology that you were responsible for, right? So if you were going to spin up something like Instagram, let's say, something along the lines of Instagram back 20 years ago. So, what the hell was it called? Flickr? I think it was called Flickr. If you're going to spin up Flickr 20 years ago. I think that was the Instagram of its time. Right? One of the things is not only did you have to do the front end development, not only did you have to do the back end development, but you're actually also responsible for your own infrastructure. The actual fiber lines going into your infrastructure, you were responsible for. The servers that you had to spin up, you were responsible for. The clustering, the synchronization, the replication, all that horse crap, you were responsible for. Any kind of a content delivery network, we really didn't have content delivery networks back then, but any kind of like caching service or anything like that, you were responsible for. So not only did you have to hire the front end developers, not only did you have to hire the back end developers, not only did you have to hire the database administrators, but you also had to hire the sysadmins. You also had to hire the CCNPs. You also had to hire all of these people, again, in order to rack servers. If you know each one of your servers could deal with 10,000 new users, let's just say, that means every 10,000 new users, a server had to get racked. That means you had to call Dell. You had to actually buy the server from Dell. And again, you get it in this big box, and then you open the thing, and then you put on the racks, and then you slide the whole thing in, right? There was a lot of work that went along with this. One of the things to be thinking about is nowadays with AWS, with Azure, with Google services, DigitalOcean, and so many other things, that so much of the infrastructure type technology services, people no longer have to hire folks in order to be able to do that work. And so it releases them geographically so that they don't all have to be in one specific area. Beyond that, one of the big things for being in Silicon Valley or being in one of the tech centers not that long ago was the whole idea of investment, right? In order for you to become the gazillion-dollar company, you needed tens or hundreds of millions of dollars of investment. Again, when you're buying servers, when you're racking servers, when you have to build out your own data center or rent a co-location facility, when you have to pay for your own pipes, when you have to do all this kind of stuff, you need a metric crap ton of money. It's becoming very interesting in this modern world, again, with AWS and other services as basically their credit card scaling. If you need more services, you just swipe your credit card and you get more services. The reality is you need a hell of a lot less money to actually get to some kind of critical mass at this point in time, in a way that you didn't need before. And so I think nowadays that there is this idea that you need to be in Silicon Valley, or that you need to be in Austin, or you need to be in tech centers, again, based off of the world as it was 10 or 20 years ago, not necessarily based off of the world as it is today. And again, when we talk about creativity, I always love this, because again, people from Silicon Valley, they love to smell their own farts, and they just think they're the most creative human beings to ever exist. I don't know why. If they're so creative, why have they destroyed San Francisco? San Francisco used to be a vibrant, artistic, amazing city. And since tech took it over, it's become a hellhole. So creative. Well, we never thought about that before. We're going to be so disruptive. We're going to destroy all the creativity. All the creative people are going to become homeless and starving, and then you're just going to get a bunch of boring sysadmins running around the streets. But anyways, I think there is an interesting issue here. And again, with the modern world, and when we start looking at technology, is because, again, if you look back 10 or 20 years ago, the reality is that there were a metric crap ton of problems to solve. There's still a metric crap ton of problems to solve. But there was basically any problem you could think about 10 or 20 years ago needed to be solved by technology. Again, and what you had is you had a lot of the Silicon Valley folks essentially go for the low-hanging fruit. Again, you have the Facebooks of the world, you have the Snaps of the world, you have the Craigslists of the world. You have a lot of tools for geeks to try to get laid. Because it's their problem. It's really hard for geeks to get laid. Don't laugh at them. Don't laugh. It's hard, right? So you have a lot of geeks out there. And they're essentially, if you look at a lot of what's come out of Silicon Valley for a long time now, it's essentially basically geeks trying to get laid. The curious part is, again, if you look at a lot of the technology that's getting to the rest of the world, there are many areas where we're just not actually seeing technology that makes the world really a better place. I think about this. There was somebody that I met out of Indianapolis. So going to one of these startup events years ago, that crap, I forgot the event. I'm getting old. Oh, 40s. Don't turn 40. Don't turn 40. Anyways, intelligence. It's blah, blah, blah intelligence. Anyways. Crap, what is it? Anyway, I went to this thing, and there was this guy out of Indiana. He's one of the startup founders that I really absolutely adored because he was the king of sewage. And what I mean by that is he had actually created a startup company in order to do navigation for septic trucks. So people don't think about this. Again, 22-year-old geeks trying to get laid don't think about septic trucks. But septic trucks are a big thing in the United States. So basically, with a lot of houses here in the United States, if they're not connected to main sewer systems in cities, they have what are called septic tanks. So all the crap, all the pee, all the crap, all the everything else goes in this tank. The water goes into the surrounding area, and then every couple of years you actually have to pump out basically all the poop and whatever is left there, right? So this is a huge thing. Again, in the U.S., lots and lots and lots of people have septic tanks, and so there's lots of septic trucks out there. They're basically big. They look like these big water trucks. Like crap goes in, you don't drink anything out of it. Anywho, the curious thing about these septic trucks is they get no miles per gallon. I think like on diesel they get something like 10 miles to the gallon, maybe. It's somewhere between like 5 to 10 miles per gallon, because again, they're just absolutely massive trucks that are literally hauling around a metric crap ton of crap. Like literally, they're hauling around a metric crap ton of crap. So they get no miles per gallon. And so what this person figured out is if he could save just a few miles every day for septic trucks going from point A to point B, that could actually save a lot of money for the septic truck company. And so a lot of these companies, they own 10, 20, possibly 50 trucks. They're all out, getting routed to whatever septic tanks that need to get pumped all day long. And so again, the normal issue with routing is sometimes it takes longer at one particular location than you think it does. Sometimes it doesn't take as long as you think it would. And so if you create a route in the beginning of the day, the most efficient route at the beginning of the day may not be the most efficient route within a single hour of all your trucks being on the road. And so what this particular person did is he created this GPS, coordinate system with real-time tracking of the septic tank trucks connected to the database of all the current open work orders. And so basically it would real-time route every single truck as they finished with one job. They could simply press a button and they were given the next job. So they were required, let's say, do 10 jobs per day, but they didn't know what 10 jobs they would be doing per day. They just go from one to the next to the next to the next to the next. And the great thing was it saved each one of these trucks quite a few miles in a given day. So again, at that point in time, gasoline was, let's say, $4 a gallon. So if you even save, let's say, 25 miles, which isn't much if you're going to all these things, if each truck saved like 25 miles per day, I mean that could be, that's five gallons. So that's about $20, right? So if you have 20 trucks running, if you can save 25 miles per truck per day, that's $400 per day that can be saved. $12,000 per month that can be saved. And so what this guy did is he came up with a system, and basically it was a subscriber fee. Every single truck, they got charged $50 a month in order to use the service, and he got to be the king of poop for a little while. And I thought that was absolutely fabulous because it was a real problem that normal people have issues with, normal businesses have issues with. It actually solved the problem, and it had a real value proposition. Of course, when he went to the startup convention thing, nobody really liked him because he was dealing with poop. He wasn't trying to deal with how to get geeks laid. And so one of the things I think is the big thing now, kind of in the modern world, is the reality is when we talk about things like creativity, again, what do we mean by creativity? Words have meanings. And the reality is Silicon Valley, Austin, Seattle, these places, they literally are not that creative. They are monocultures at this point, right? They've got their little tunnel vision on. They see the world as they see the world. Again, Anybody else that that deals with any of these people thinks that they're completely, utterly bat crap insane, and they think the rest of the world needs to copy them. Hey, look, we have the highest homeless population in the entire country. We have the highest, wage disparity in the entire country. We have more kids going hungry in our state than anybody else. Of course, everybody needs to copy California. Anyways, what I would argue in this modern world is as technology has become commodified, everything from smartphones to laptops to the servers. Again, we talk about AWS, talk about Azure, talk about all those things. The hardware component of the technology has basically become commodified. When you look at what is required to actually develop apps in order to develop platforms and those types of things anymore, that has become relatively commodified as the skill level as everybody else in the country and frankly everybody else around the world starts to get better and better and better and better. I think the reality is that when we start looking at creativity, we need to start finding people that are more creative in actually finding real world problems. Again, just think about this for a second. California has Apple. California has Facebook. California has Google, right? And they have more homeless people almost in the rest of the country. Their homeless population is through the roof. These are supposedly the smartest, most creative people our country have to offer. And the homeless problem in their area is just absolutely and utterly bat crap insane. Why? Because they are working on the problems that they'd give a damn about. And they don't give a damn about homeless people at the end of the day. Why do you think they have to virtue signal all the time? Why do you think they have to pretend to be activists all the time? Because if they're not pretending to be activists, they might actually have to look at the people in the eye on the street and confront the fact that what they've done to their own society has created this mass just horror show in front of their eyes. And so what I think about nowadays is, again, with the commodification of all this stuff, is if we can have more people around the country looking at the problems that they are actually dealing with, then using technology in order to solve the problems that they're actually dealing with, I think that is far more powerful as a concept of creativity than any of the garbage that San Francisco or Silicon Valley or Austin or Seattle or whatever else have at this point in time. Again, we need to be figuring out housing. We need to be figuring out healthcare. We need to be figuring out education. We need to be figuring out everything that these companies aren't dealing with. Great. You know what I'm saying? Like we now have viral posts. We misinformation can now warp around the world in a fraction of a second. In the blink of an eye, misinformation can loop the world 50 times as more and more people are becoming homeless. And so that's where I think is very interesting is kind of the idea of if localities can start nurturing more technology in their communities, that more people can then start using the technology to actually solve their specific problems. So yeah, that's what I kind of think about that. No, I don't know. That's my thought. Maybe I'm biased. Probably biased. But yeah, and that's where I do wonder. I do wonder what's going to happen with San Francisco. That's what I do wonder what's going to happen with Seattle. Because again, all of these places too. And again, when we talk about things like creativity. I was talking to somebody the other day that had moved here from San Francisco, and him and his girlfriend were paying $2,200 a month for a 400 square foot efficiency apartment. $2,200 a month for a 400 square. So literally, this room that's too small in order to do the classes that I want to do is 300 square feet. So their entire apartment is only slightly bigger than this, paying $2,200 a month. And again, one of the things that you have to start thinking about is when people are under that kind of financial pressure, how creative can they be? Again, if you look at San Francisco, think about this for a second, right? The myth of starting your startup company in a garage in San Francisco, right? Google and Apple and all these people started out of garages or basements or whatever else. You can't do that anymore. You don't just have a random garage that's basically considered worthless. That somebody can ask their parents if they can use that in order to do a startup company anymore. Hell, that garage is worth $3,000 a month if you rent it out, right? And so if you look at it with the prices in these areas going up and up and up and up, it also begs the question, how does that then start killing creativity? Again, what about the people that are not willing to sell their souls? One of the things that I find very interesting, again, with Silicon Valley and the idiocy, the cancerous mentality that's going on in that world right now, is like there's this whole idea about, here's to the crazy ones. Right? People feel that, yeah, the crazy ones. I'm sorry, the crazy ones that have to bend over and spread their bunghole so that the VCs can have their turn whenever they want. How can you be a crazy one when basically you're on your knees all the time groveling to rich people? That's what I like about my rebels. When I see a rebel on their knees giving a VC a Hummer, that's how I know that's a rebel I want to support. Oh, that's probably not family friendly. I get pissed off with all this though, right? Like I say, there's the mythology. There's the mythology in that world. The rebel. What are you talking about? You're on your knees begging for money from rich people. It is the antithesis of a rebel. It's the antithesis of a revolutionary. It's the person groveling for the scraps that the bourgeoisie will throw at you, and by golly, the bourgeoisie wants a return on that investment of giving you their frickin' scraps. So again, when we talk about creativity, if you go to Silicon Valley, you go to San Francisco, anybody you hire, you essentially have to pay $100,000 a year just so that they can get by. How does that create anything revolutionary? When you have to be on your knees begging for table scraps from the bourgeoisie so that you can rent an office or get a garage or anything else, right? It costs so much money to do anything in these areas now. The thought of thinking of these people as scrappy rebels or whatever is idiotically ridiculous. The only way that you can think that they are revolutionaries, you can think that they are rebels, you can think that they're fighting the good fight, is if you've got whatever brain cancer those people over there have. Because it just doesn't make any sense. Again, I would argue that's one of the things I find interesting about going to places like Cleveland or Lincoln, Nebraska, or Baltimore. I'm not going to deal with Baltimore anymore, but Baltimore. When you can rent office space for $1,000 a month, when you can hire people for a reasonable amount of money. Look, we are going to give you equity, and we're going to give you $25,000 a year. $25,000 a year isn't a lot, but you can get by. It's a starvation wage in this area. You can get by so that we can create the next great dog dating app. And if we actually become successful, then you'll have the equity in the company, and you can hopefully make a crap ton of money after that point. Again, when you start looking at the reality of the world as it currently stands versus the myth of the psychotic folks in California, you start realizing that what is the California dream at this point? Again, I gotta think about this for myself. Again, people, oh, Eli, why don't you go to San Francisco? And theoretically, I could, but why? The quality of life is crap. Again, like, if you ignore all the homeless people, if you ignore the horror that the technology companies have created, I guess it's a utopia. Just ignore the homeless people. Just ignore the drug problems. Just ignore the city employees that literally are not paid enough money anymore to even be able to live anywhere near the city at this point. When you look at all of this stuff, the reality is why would San Francisco or these places be the place to spin up startup companies? And I would argue it's not at this point. I think we're going to start seeing more and more technology companies getting spun up in areas outside of those places, and then the venture capitalists are going to have to figure out whether or not they actually want to do a bit of a commute. Because that's one of the big things with Silicon Valley and some of these other places, the whole idea where the venture capitalists are lazy. They don't want to go too far. I mean, when they throw you table scraps, they don't want to have to go too far to figure out whether you're doing table scraps, right? They always want to be able to track you down, right? They pull your leash a little bit, right? You can't have a leash that stretches 3,000 miles. A leash can only stretch, as far as maybe the Bay Area or whatever. And so one of the big things is, again, one of the arguments for Silicon Valley is that you need to be where the investors are. But here's the interesting thing: if the cost for services, again, everything from server services, routing services, storage, compute, everything else, if that falls to the floor, so you don't need VC funding for that. If the actual skill sets are available so that people can actually start building their startup companies, if that's available for a lesser cost, the reality is that there's less and less need for that kind of VC funding. And so VCs are going to have to figure out whether or not they're okay with doing interviews or whatever over Zoom calls, and if they're not, they'll get left out of the next generation of whatever the hell happens. So those are kind of my thoughts with it. And again, like I say, I look at why would I want to live in San Francisco? Why would I want to live in San Francisco now? Why would I want to live in Austin at this point? Again, I've been to San Francisco quite a bit. Went there 20 years ago. 20 years ago, it wasn't too bad. Now it's been destroyed. Again, I'm not Tucker Carlson or anything on this. I'm not talking about libtards. I don't even think it is a libtards. I really don't think it's a liberal thing, to be honest with you. It's the tech insanity. You have this massive consolidation of money to basically Aspies, right? To arrogant, egotistical people that are not thinking about their larger community. Again, really think about this. This is my frustration. Again, when I talk about the sickness in Google, when I talk about the sickness in Apple, the sickness in Facebook, these companies are worth $1 trillion at this point. I think they're all worth Facebook isn't quite worth $1 trillion yet, but they're worth metric crap tons of money. So why, if they know that housing is such a major societal issue in their area, and they know people are willing to pay for housing, they just can't pay that much for housing. Why is Google not funding massive housing programs? Not necessarily even out of the goodness of their heart. Again, and that's one thing, right? I'm not talking about being good. I'm not talking about socialism. I'm just saying, hey, look, if you have a metric crap ton of money in your company, why don't you start building and helping to build and investing in enough housing that can be created for the local population? Again, when you look at Tim Cook, right? Tim Cook right now is just trying to grab every grimy dollar he can get, right? Tim Cook is so greedy at this point in order to get the valuation of Apple up that he's driving people like me away from most likely buying Apple computers in future generations, right? This whole thing going on with the App Store and how they demand, 30% of all revenue going through the App Store and all of that, right? This is so much greed. They have something like $200 billion in cash. So Apple, the good company, right? They want you to know that they're a good company as they try to claw every dime they can out of people. Why? Why are they not putting a chunk of that money into real estate development in their particular area? Because they don't see it. They don't recognize it. People expect humans that don't see other humans to solve the problems, right? It's horrible what's going on there. And so that's where I look at, again, like I say, the quality of living in San Francisco is pure and utter garbage, right? You're going to pay a metric crap ton of money in order to get nothing in San Francisco. Your quality of life is going to be crap. You're going to be surrounded by homeless people. And where's the fun? Where's the value proposition there? So that's why I think more and more technology is going to move to other areas. It's kind of like, like right now, I think San Francisco and these particular cities are kind of going through what Detroit went through 50, 60 years ago. And again, remember, Detroit was not always Detroit. Detroit of the 1950s is not the Detroit of today. But remember when the big four, the major auto manufacturers were in Detroit, Ford, GMC, whatever the hell the other ones are, right? And then when they were in Detroit, they were just getting hammered to high hell and back on unionization, on taxes, on a whole bunch of other things. And so what did they decide to do at a certain point? They decided to start building car factories down in the South. They realized if they went south, they could hire people for less money. They could build factories for a hell of a lot less. There'd be a hell of a lot less regulatory burden. And if they went south, people would be happy for the jobs. So what did they do? They started building car factories in the South. So now all the car factories. When was the last time you heard of a car factory actually being built in Detroit or even in the Michigan area? It's not even thought about anymore. As Detroit falls in on itself, all the new Mercedes and BMW, all the new car factories, they're being created in the South. Again, when Elon Musk is creating a factory for the Cybertruck, was Detroit even on the list? No, because nobody gives a damn about Detroit anymore. What used to be the center of auto manufacturing, because of a change in the world, manufacturing became easier, transportation became easier, so many things became easier to put to other places, and so that's what happened. I would argue the same thing is going to happen with San Francisco. As more and more people realize that they can have development companies, that they can actually do relatively significant things almost anywhere in the country, almost anywhere in the world, the value of being in a place like San Francisco is going to drop. And you're going to have more and more people that are literally just going to open their eyes. They're just going to open their eyes and they're just going to go, oh my God, I'm surrounded by homeless people. Oh God, there's needles on the ground. Oh God, is that human crap? And then it's like, well, wait a minute. If I can develop anything that whatever I want from anywhere in the country, why do I want to have to worry about jumping, trying to skip around human crap? And it's curious, like with the whole COVID epidemic, like again, it was one of the interesting things with being here in Asheville. So I've been networking with people here in Asheville, going to meetups, like you should go to. And what's very curious is, so most of the meetups I went to actually had a lot of Asheville folks. So a lot of the Asheville, and that's where I talked about people that develop in PHP and people developing for WordPress and all that kind of stuff. What's very interesting is, again, I went to a meetup, I guess it was last week, and I talked, and it was all for coders. So not necessarily tech, but actually it's a coder meetup. And I started talking to people there, and the people there are high-level coders, but they don't work for any Asheville companies. They don't deal with PHP. They made it clear how they felt about PHP. But you had a lot of highly paid, highly placed coding professionals that are now in Asheville, because with the pandemic and with the ramifications of being able to do remote work, they realized they don't want to have to be jumping over human crap anymore. They can come to some place like Asheville, and to them, Asheville is still dirt cheap. Again, it's going to create its own problems here, I get that. But anyways, it's still dirt cheap for them. And so they're like, hey, I can be in Asheville where I can walk to the bars, I can take a drive to the mountains, I'm in this beautiful, wonderful area at a fraction of the cost for San Francisco. I can still do the job that I was essentially doing in San Francisco, still getting my salary. Why go to San Francisco? And again, with Slack, with Zoom, with Microsoft Teams, the way that people communicate anymore, I think there's a real question about what the actual value proposition for the Bay Area is at this point, or any of those kind of technology hubs, and if they aren't more destructive than people realize. Because again, if you have collisions, that's what I say. Like one of the most interesting things I find about Silicon Valley is, if you look again, they're not spreading into any of the cities in this country, right? Silicon Valley doesn't want to deal with either Trump supporters or black people. Oh golly, I'm trying to be family friendly here, but we know it's true, right? The Valley folks, they don't want to deal with Trump supporters. Hell no, we're not going to deal with Trump supporters. And they don't want to deal with black people. They don't want to deal with either of them, right? Anything that is out of their little field of view, they don't want to tolerate. So what happens to technology companies? What happens to these massive corporations that refuse, literally, quite literally, refuse to deal with the problems that people in their country are having? What happens when they refuse to deal with the actual issues people are having and keep focusing on whatever garbage you're focusing on? Like right now, what was it? Like Mark Zuckerberg, right? Facebook. Facebook is now coming out with a newsletter app. Golly. Oh my golly. We're going to get a newsletter app from Facebook. Wow, that's so creative. I mean, Eli. If they weren't in the Bay Area, they could never be so creative as to create a cloned newsletter app. And I think that's one of the interesting things to be thinking about. Again, when we talk about things like creativity. How much creativity have you seen for the past 5 years? When you look at your computer, when I look at my computers are basically doing the same crap that they were 5 years ago. Again, even my TV, I've got a smart TV and all that, but it's basically doing the same crap that it was doing 5 years ago. So much of the technology that we're dealing with, it's incrementally better than what we had 5 years ago. But there's no iPhone moment, there's no iPad moment, there's no PC moment, there's no internet moment, there's no broadband moment, right? There's no credit card on the internet moment. When was the last time you really looked at technology and went, wow? Other than Azure Cognitive Services. Azure Cognitive Services, they are cool. I won't lie, they're cool. But anyways. So those are my thoughts. That's why I think technology will spread out to more places. And again, I would argue, I think the Valley and San Francisco and all that will become ever less relevant, to be honest with you. Even if the major corporations stay there. So that's my thought. If you have a question for me, put the question down in the comment section. Again, I generally try to do one question a day, unless I decide to play video games that day. I have my priorities, darn it. Let's see, if you like the idea of Silicon Dojo, again, free to the end user, hopefully hands-on technology, or hands-on education. Soon, you can think about throwing some money into DonorBox, donorbox.org/ETCG to support what I'm trying to do. If you want a one-on-one meeting with me, so I do one-on-one meetings with folks where we talk about their careers, business, technology, that type of thing. If you want to come to the Asheville area, if you go to silicondojo.com, on the right-hand side, there is a link. Click on the link and sign up for an appointment. If you want to come to the meetup, so we will be having a meetup in a couple of weeks. I'm not sure what the meetup's going to be. It's either going to be on the Microsoft text and speech thing, or it's going to be Introduction to Hacking. Anyways, if you're in the Asheville area and you want to come to one of those classes, definitely sign up for Meetup. If you're waiting for the longer classes, it fell through. I had a whole business thing that kind of fell through. I thought we were going to be getting a lot bigger space. There's a really cool, lot bigger space, like 3 times the size of this room. I thought as of July 1st, I was going to be able to get that space for Silicon Dojo. Unfortunately, that fell through. So we probably are not going to be getting a larger space for quite a while, probably a few months. So if you're waiting for the longer classes, at some point I do want to start doing weekend classes. So take like 8 hours, 5 to 8 hours, and do like an entire thing, like kind of like a Network Plus crash course, or cybersecurity crash course, or Linux crash course. The idea for the people basically is give you the basic concepts that you need so that you can actually learn more. I do plan to be doing those, but those have gotten pushed off. I was hoping to start those within July, but then that whole deal fell through. Again, business. I can't really talk about it. I don't really want to talk about it, but it's just like, what? I don't understand why it fell through. I got money. You got a space. Why is this not happening? But it didn't happen. So anyways, that's about all I got to say. So with that, I look forward to seeing you at the next video. And more importantly, I hope to see you here in Asheville, North Carolina.